Yo, how we doing? Anybody out there? How we doing, guys, girls, everything in between, I guess. Sorry, I'm just trying to get everything set up here. Put a banner in here. Anything new with you? I'll share that screen. Yeah. All right. So, updated stats. Pretty much every stat everywhere. For 2020 has already been updated in my database. I'm going to share the link in the chat for anyone who wants it. I share this one on the stream every week. Welcome to the Monday Grind, by the way. And also post it on Patreon. Post it in my weekly DLF target article. So follow that link if you want to see the updated stats through Sunday, week 10. How you doing? So some changes this week. Some of the stuff I've put in there, I just started calculating dominator rating because I was like, hey, I could put that in there. That'd be neat, right? Now, dominator rating specifically is a receiving stat. You got to remember it's calculating the percentage of receiving yards and touchdowns for that team's total throughout the season so far. So it's not college dominator. It's not player specific. It's this season specific on the receiving game so far. Now, of course, that doesn't adjust for players who've only played a few games. For instance, last night I stayed up way too late looking at rookie stats, specifically trying to find ways I can compare season numbers in the form that they're in right now to a past history in my NFL database, because of the way we're calculating some of them, they don't directly correlate. I'll explain some of that in a second, but it's actually pretty difficult to compare season-long numbers to 10 weeks of Mims only having 4 games played, for example. And I think he right now has like a 4% dominator rating, no, 9%, which I don't think accurately describes how well he's doing in those games. I'm not a particular fan of per game numbers in most instances, unless I can test to prove that they're useful or more useful or in some way helpful. And I haven't been able to do that with most of these things because I haven't calculated them the same way in my NFL database, because I'm using a weekly database for the 2020 stats. And calculating something using weekly stats instead of season-long stats actually produce a significant, decent number. Like, are you guys aware how much stats are calculated? Like, very simple stats are calculated wildly differently from one source to another. That's why I really think at this point we have to track it for ourselves, so we always know we're looking at the same stat the same way, calculated using the same data, like all a single database. And yet you want to compare RotoViz numbers to player profiler numbers all the time because they have different stats and they're calculating different things, but they're all based on things like target share or receiving percentage share or yards per team pass attempt, and you can calculate those very differently. And so you're actually looking at 2 wildly different sources unless they're doing it the same way. And so it gets tricky. For example, let's take an example here. I got my sheet up. Let's look at Rager. He's someone I was looking at last night. Right now, his target share is what? His season-long target share that you can drag from RotoViz at any time. Just ask for the target share this year, which seems like the simple stats, right? Team passing attempts, player targets. It's a percentage calculation. Easy. Perfect. But if we go and look at his weekly data, where is he? And then go just look at his team target share on a weekly basis. So the percentage of targets he's had in the weeks that he's played, you'll see he has a 23% target share, a 19% target share, and then 2 10% target shares. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't work out to the same number. No, it doesn't. That's the average target share for Jalen Reagor this year is actually closer to 16%. It's like 15.5%. So his 14% target share number is correct if you use season-long numbers, and it's incorrect if you actually look at what he's done. So which is true? Well, go per game. No, you don't want to go per game, because per game numbers, unless we can test and prove that they actually have a statistically relevant difference and are not discounting good players and improving bad players, we do want to go per game a lot of the time. It runs the risk of a lot of split stats, the same error and also misguided information that splits can often give us. Like, well, through these 3 games, this guy was great. Sure, but there's 3 games. And when you look at these next 3 games, he sucks, then that split stat hurt you. That's a simple problem with splits. Now, if you want to compare per game numbers to per game numbers, we'd actually have to study that specific stats calculated that specific way to see if it's relevant, or if it falls. Hey, Spaceman, how you doing? Hat tip to you too. To see if it's relevant, to see if we need to pay attention to it that way. Now, in terms of target share, it's not it's not deadly to our understanding of a player. That 14% for Jalen Reagor sounds pretty good for a rookie and kind of loosely fits what we've been seeing, right? Except for over the last 2 weeks when he's really been playing, he's had, upwards of 19% or more, and then you could look at a trend stat, fine. But that's just target share. And the same problem, any stat that requires team information or a team context, which are the best stats, frankly, like target share, yards per team pass attempt, has at least those 2 ways of calculating it. You can look at what they do on a week-to-week basis and look at the average, which is what I prefer to do. Which is how my where is it? The stat I've been getting more and more interested in and starting to apply to my broader scale process as well is yards per team pass attempt, or yards per team attempt, actually, because that way you can compare running back and wide receiver a little bit better, instead of just passing attempt. I think it's a really good stat to view people positionally within a season at least, and it's also fairly consistent week over week and year over year. You can roughly expect it to be sticky in that players will stay around the same number, and therefore we can use it for prediction, for projection, for seeing who's good and who's going to be good the next season, which is really what we want in Dynasty and in Redraft, right? Is Justin Jefferson going to be good tonight? Yeah, he's probably going to be pretty good tonight because he's really good in this stat, and this stat is consistent. It tests to be about the player, something they are doing, not the team is doing, not the quarterback is doing, and so sticky stats are actually predictive, are actually the best. And Justin Jefferson's killing it in that stat, by the way. Now, if you look at his average, he's got him 1.4 yards per team pass attempt. If you look at the average player that breaks out into a top 24 season, they average over 1. Jalen Reagor's 1.4 is actually particularly good. And this was actually some part of what I was looking at last night. I was trying to dig into expectations for rookies using these stats, which I actually don't have in my database. So, because I don't have a weekly database I can rely on. So, no, I didn't want that one. I was looking for something else. Hang on, where am I? Testing rookie numbers. That's what I called it. All right. All right, so this is really raw because I wasn't making it present to people, but I was looking at different thresholds for yards per team and pass attempt per game, which is something that I can calculate for 2020 and then go back to my actual NFL database and calculate. Which actually brings me to why I have another yards per team attempt stat in here. That's yards per team attempt per game. So what I figured out is the team's attempts per game on average this season, and then a player's yards per game on average this season, and then divided those 2 together. So essentially it's adjusting it per game through a more sophisticated method than just, dividing it by games. Now, what's encouraging is that the stat itself, let me get rid of my ugly mug here and you can see it a bit better. And we're just looking at rookies here. It actually looks to be fairly consistent with this if you look at the average for the weekly score, which I've actually tested and found to be pretty good. You can see the scoring pretty similar numbers, but not exact numbers, and that's fine. You don't expect them to be exact. So what I've got to dig into now is where is the big differences coming from, and if we really need to pay attention to it that way. But the reason I'm calculating it a different way, and in the 2020 update that I just gave you, I have both of these stats in here is because I'm just starting to test out this way of calculating that stat that I think is becoming more and more common, right? Yards per team attempt. We're getting more and more familiar with hearing that. But again, and if you didn't know this, like if you really want to use stats or get into stats, instead of just using them as a reference point, and that's fine if that's what you want to use them for. But if you want to get them to a deeper understanding of what a player is going to do, if they're going to keep doing it, for example, you should really know that most of these stats, any stats that requires team context, can be calculated at least basically 2 different ways. And you can actually calculate it a whole bunch of different ways. This isn't the same way that some people calculated college dominator, if we go back to rookie stats, by adjusting everything per game and then just dividing 2 numbers instead of looking at their raw stats and doing it overall, which led me to write an article called Per Game College Dominator is a Sham, because it boosted bad players and decreased good players. So it would actually create a negative effect on our hit rate. So per game isn't good just because it boosts a few players that some people wanted their evaluation to be higher on. And that was really the motivation for doing it. Like, it didn't actually increase the signal. It just made some players we wanted to be good look better or closer to what good players do. And because it reduced them and increased them. And all of those players we did that for, by the way, didn't work out. They actually didn't hit. So we didn't want them to look better, it turns out. So, and I wrote that a few years ago, but that's the end consequence. Me being right, apparently. It happens very, very rarely. Spaceman says, I love yards per team attempt for college players. Yeah, it's really useful college stat, but this is something, again, I have to break into through a college perspective. Like, we can calculate it both ways in college as well. If we wanted a weekly database of college data, which I don't think anyone is going to do. But anyway, sticking with the NFL for a second. That's why I've created this second and kept it in, because I want people, like, I try and be open and clear. Like, if I start using this stat, I want people to know I've moved on from calculating it this way. And this way I love. Like, I've been testing this and using this weekly, especially for within the same position evaluation of who's doing better and worse. I think it's really good context because it adjusts for what the team's doing, how much the team's passing. So it's relatively recent. Also, while testing this, the per game, something that strikes me, which I don't think is necessarily, what's the word? You wouldn't think it without looking. You would think the opposite would be true. The lower ADOT you have, the higher your yards per team attempt should technically be. On average, people with lower ADOTs get higher yards per team attempt scores, which I don't know. That's not the way I thought it would shake out, just thinking about it on the surface. But when you actually test, like players in the top 24, for example, with an ADOT below 10, they average about 1.06 yards per team pass attempt per game. And players with an ADOT over 10 inside the top 24, do that quickly. Which one's lower? Which one's higher? Yeah, they average slightly less. So, I mean, that doesn't jump off the page to you. So, weird, huh? Let me see if I got that right, though. If we look at the same sample size, players that finished inside the top 24, one with a high ADOT over 10, one with a low ADOT under 10. I've got all sorts of conditions in here. I'm forgetting how I set it up. Okay, let's say they averaged at least 2 top 24 seasons. Okay, if you look at it that way, it's actually reversed. It's very clear I don't understand this stat yet, to be honest with you. Doing weird things to me. Yeah, okay. You have a high ADOT. Oh, I'm just leaving this condition completely. Any draft capital in year one? No, I don't need it. Okay, I'm not gonna be able to figure this out quickly, am I? All right, let's just go up on my research here. High ADOT, low ADOT, drafted in the same range, finished in the top 24. Not the 124. to do, yeah. And let's say Eddie, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm wrong. Players with a high dart do average higher yards per team pass attempt per game. Okay, well, that makes more sense. That makes more sense to what I was thinking. Okay. All right. Forget I said that. All right. So then when we go back to rookies for this season, for example, specifically wide receivers, that also means you have to take into the ADOT context. So that's where most people, I think, roll this into one number and trying to create another super stat we have to learn the acronym of. But I really, that's not my process. So when you look at someone like Justin Jefferson and T. Higgins, both of them have over 1 yard per team attempt this season, and you kind of expect them to have higher yards per team attempt, so because both of them have ADOTs over 12. Whereas Brandon Ayuk, for example, has an ADOT, hasn't played a lot of games yet, so that'll adjust a little bit. But so far, he's got an ADOT under 10, and he's still averaging over 1 yards per team pass attempt. In fact, interestingly enough, for the few games that Brandon Ayuk has played, and I was not a heavy Brandon Ayuk fan, most of the things I can use to test rookie numbers compared to past rookies and who was successful later, Brandon Ayuk's doing pretty well, which is strange. He hasn't played enough games yet for me to be like, okay, I need to reverse my rookie opinion of Brandon Ayuk. He's actually been pretty impressive so far. Something I'm actually concerned about is Jalen Reagor tests poorly in most of these things that I've just started to look at between past rookies and the rookies of this class and how well they did moving forward for those past rookies based on what they did in there. Because everyone seems to be doing well now, right? The whole entire rookie class is doing well. So I need some way of adjusting who to like more and who to like less outside of just my preconceived college, because I still use those. But my college prospect evaluation processes, that's normally what I do. I lean on those pretty heavily. So I'm looking for a way of using NFL stats to try to judge who's going to be more consistent, who's going to be the guy who produces 2 top 24 seasons versus the guy who's going to be Kelvin Benjamin, right? 1 top 24 season, and everyone laughs when you say he was good at any point. And he had a terrible rookie profile, which, is why I still heavily lean on those even after year 1. But I'm looking for something in the NFL stats that can help me out with it outside of the college profile. Yards per team pass attempt per game, or in fact, either stat, yards per team attempt. Jalen Reagor is the one, Henry Ruggs as well, but, I'm not looking for reasons to bolster him. And I guess I kind of am for Reagor. Reagor's not doing well. And that's whether you go per game or his average. In the games that he's played, despite the fact I'm really encouraged with the yardage he's getting, he hasn't been exceedingly efficient, is the word. And for adjusted for the team context, the total passing offense of that team on those targets. And that's kind of worrying for a guy who was like my guy, if there's such a thing, in this rookie class for wide receivers, in this great rookie class. Yeah. Now, again, not being efficient puts you in a slightly lower hit rate category. Wow, a significantly lower hit rate category for getting more opportunity the next year. So that's why it would be concerning for Reagor. I don't know if that is true with yards per team pass attempt per game because I've really just started looking at it. But the reason I was calculating this way, to go back to it, is so I can compare it back to past rookies. So if we look at, past rookies who did well and badly after a good or a bad rookie year, that's why I'm starting to dig into it. So yeah, how you doing, Spaceman? We always start off with like 30 viewers and drop to like 5 of you, 10 of you after a little while, which I'm very comfortable with. But that's why I did my rant up front. All right, so the reason I started digging into that and stayed up way too late last night trying to put it all together, and it's going to take a little longer, is because one of my patrons asked for an update on my Chase Claypool video, because I did one pre-draft on what I thought of Chase Claypool. So I did one on everyone, I think. Rookie profile, and I got a lot right, especially when I was just describing, what the stats tell us about his career and what they can't. But then when I tried to apply analysis, my opinion of what his evaluation was going to be in the NFL, I think I just have to call myself wrong. Like I was like, if I can get him in the 3rd round, sure. And that's someone who depending on how you want to evaluate it, he's pretty much tied for third best rookie wide receiver this year. And he's also really weird. He's got like 2 rushing touchdowns. That's not really comparable to a lot of other players. And so his evaluation is pretty hard right now, which is why I was trying to dig into these stats to find a fair way to see if he's going to continue or sustain. Because the easy comparison here is Chase Claypool could be Kelvin Benjamin. But I'm worried that's just, the bias I had from not being high on his rookie profile, So I was looking for a fair way to judge him. His ADOT right now is like 12, and he's one of the ones under 1 yards per team pass attempt. Most rookies who go on to have multiple fantasy relevant seasons do crest that number by the end of this rookie season if they break out in their rookie season, which is why I started to look at that. But, literally Rager is doing worse in it. So I can't, say Claypool is Benjamin when he's doing better at the thing I would use to say that than Rager. Just because my college biases, And Mims is getting there. Mims is doing pretty well on his, pretty well so far, and he's also someone operating on a limited sample like Ayuk right now, so the jury's still out. But yeah, it's really hard to separate out this rookie class because they're all having pretty good rookie years. So I was looking for some kind of trend that suggests that players who have good rookie years and then flag. But there are very few of them because if having a good rookie year is one of the clearest indications they're going to continue to be good. So there are very few like Kelvin Benjamin that, subsequently failed after that. And that's just crossing basic thresholds. That's not necessarily finishing in the top 24. There's very few rookies who have good seasons passing those average expectations we've spoken about before and then don't go on to be good. But it's also a little hard to believe that all of these guys are going to keep being good. Now, we have said that the wide receiver position needs some replenishing, or it's kind of due for it. It's fairly good timing for a replacing of the old guard in some ways. Not that I'm team old guy, but we've already lost a number of them from Alshon Jeffrey to Antonio Brown. Over the last few years, we've seen a number of players fade out. The wide receiver positions struggle. And in the same way that happened for the running back position from 2016 to 2019, we had this replenishing of good rookie running backs coming up after a few bad years. To finally fill in the talent we'd lost in the NFL. I kind of think that's kind of due for the wide receiver position. So it's specifically open for that. But it's still hard to believe every rookie wide receiver in a class is going to be good. Like we've got 1 year of that, 2014, So, and, maybe it's just time to bite the bullet and say this is the most 2014 like of a rookie class. But, trying to do my due diligence over here. It's a little too easy. They're all doing good, therefore the 2014 class, I still think evaluation-wise, 2018 was the most 2014-ish in terms of what they did in college. Anyway. Welcome to my grind, by the way. Sorry, I just lost my voice for a second here. Anyone got any questions on these rookies or anything else for that matter? Because that's what I've been working on, as well as trying to write that chapter on rookie college statistics specifically. I've been trying to reassess what I think of specifically rookie stats in the NFL, their first-year stats, essentially. It's not a new way. That's a good question, Spaceman, but that's kind of what I'm telling you. It's not new at all. There's always been this disparity, and I'm really just starting to understand how it's different because I typically don't collect weekly data. I haven't created a weekly database because, frankly, Excel can't handle too much weekly data, as you know. Now, not just new to you, it's definitely new to me too, and I'm starting to panic a little bit over what to do with that information. All right. Like I showed you with Jalen Rager that his target share is either close to 16%, because he's had a game with 10%, game with 10%, game with 23%, and a game with 19%. So the average there, he's averaging 15.5% target share, right? But when you look at the season-long numbers and actually calculate target share as RotoViz is doing for the weekly shit or the seasonal shit, it comes out to, what was it, 14%, 13%? So which is true? That's not me saying what is true. I don't know. But target share is actively calculated two different ways at the moment. Depends on where you're getting your numbers. But if you look at the weekly data on RotoViz, like I know you do, and you probably do more of it than me, Jalen Rager's target share, here you go. Like his average target share in the 4 games he's played in week 2, 1, 2, 8, and 10, right? So you just look at that average, the average of the actual target share he's had in the games that he's played. This works out to an average of 15.5%. It's not like what's the difference in the way it's calculated? It's creating a different number, because when you look at Jalen Rager, like I always thought of them as intellectually identical, right? They were producing the same number. And this is a debate we had, not a debate, a conversation we had at the start of the season. You're like, wait, why are you doing the average? And so I switched to collecting the yearly data from RotoViz so that my numbers match everyone's numbers, including yours, because I didn't want to be the one with a weird number. But here's the thing. Yours and mine will both say that Jalen Rager has a 14% target share, because that's what RotoViz says. And that's what most sites will say Jalen Rager has right now, because if you divide the total season numbers, that's what it comes to. But if you look at his actual games, it's actually 15.5%. So it's not like what's the difference. The difference is it's two different numbers. And this, to me, seems fair. Like, if we just take the numbers, the target share he's actually had in the games he's played, it's 15.5. And yet every service, every database, including mine right now, says 14%. And the only reason that it would be different is because you actually go to the weekly data like we just did by flipping over to this tab, and it will be the same in your database because we're getting stats from the same place, and look at what his average target share is. Or you can look at the season-long numbers and calculate, passing attempts for Philadelphia and targets for Jalen Rager, and it comes out to 14%. And it will be the same that it's anything that's team dependent, like yards per team pass attempt. That's team dependent. So you're going to get two different numbers if you look at what the player actually did. Now, if we flip this around to something that's a little more familiar, I think, to most people, this is per game, right? That's simply the difference. Jalen Rager per game, la, 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 la. But when you think about it, you can calculate per game by going through the seasonal stats or the weekly stats again. Because if you calculate, a team's passing attempts per game, that's different than what they actually did in each and individual game, and it doesn't work out to the same number. Now, like we're seeing with these two ways of, like, they're virtually identical. So what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, if there is a big deal, and maybe there isn't, and I'm just tilting over nothing. The big deal is 14 to 15.5 is a big difference. That's crossing a threshold or not for when you're trying to project them out for the rest of their career or for the 2021 season or whatever. That's putting Rager in a category with, Brandon Ayuk, or it's dropping him down to the Henry Ruggs category. Or, in fact, the same will be true with Henry Ruggs. Actually, his number should be higher, right? Like, is he getting a similar target share to Rex Burkhead, or is he getting a similar target share to Mike Williams? Like, that's a big difference. If we're using these numbers to do anything with. Now, if we're just looking at the numbers, I think everyone manually adjusts this in their head. Like you look at the rookies and you go, okay, he's got 14%. But yeah, I know he didn't play some of the season, so it's soft. I think we mentally do that. But if we're using those numbers to create a model or create a projection, that's the number it will use. And it's accurate or inaccurate depending on which way you prefer to calculate it, because it produces two different numbers. Like it's not like, why is it different? It's different because it produces two different numbers. And I don't know which is better. And it'll be better or worse based on what actually happens, but which one is actually consistently more better? And since I haven't collected a lot of weekly data, I can't compare the two, and so it's kind of got me on tilt. Like a whole percentage different is I think this is a big deal if you're using those numbers to say one player is going to be better or worse than another, which is what we're trying to do after this season, right? Is Jalen Reagor better or worse than whoever? If you see what I mean? Like it's fine, just okay, there's a slight difference, but then presumably, yeah, actually the similar number of games they play, the smaller the difference will be. So, like comparing Mims to Reagor's, that's fine because they've played a similar number of games so far. It's just a per game adjustment, essentially. But you can calculate per games two different ways as well, because you can look at the seasonal stats and do per game, or you can look at the weekly stats and do the average. And that creates two different numbers on any stat you want to know as well. And I'm not mathematically sufficient enough to know if that's the same thing or not, but I know it's producing two different numbers. Because every stat I try it on, it produces two different numbers. Whether you look at the weekly stuff and what they actually did in their games, or if you use the seasonal stats to adjust per game, it produces two different numbers. And I can't keep having multiple, I can't have 4 different target shares. No one's going to care. I don't know which one's better. And I want the one that's best for, stickiness, essentially. But anyway, that's kind of a minor data nerd point, right? So anyway, but yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now, like which rookie is doing best on it. And anyway I look at it, CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson are the two best rookie wide receivers so far. I recently did a tweet, I thought it was a pretty good tweet, actually, where I said T. Higgins was the best, and you can make that argument. He's had the same percentage of games over 10 fantasy points as CeeDee Lamb. They ride the rookie class right now in terms of, at solid floor rookie wide receiver points, or any rookie for that matter. T. Higgins and CeeDee Lamb are at the top, not Justin Jefferson. But if you look at the yards per team pass attempt, either way of calculating it, T. Higgins is pretty good compared to him. And he's got that, fantasy point floor that's as good as CeeDee Lamb. So I think you can put T. Higgins in the conversation. I also think you can put Chase Claypool in the conversation. I don't have a great way of separating them out yet, which is what's led to this whole comparing the seasonal numbers to the weekly numbers to try and get a sense of what the players who continue to be good do and what the players who decline do using NFL stats. Now, I'm going to default to my college valuations eventually, but I'm looking for a way of improving that. I will call it the Simpsons paradox. I like it. But yeah. I don't know what to make of Claypool. Is what I'm telling you. Like, my favorite way is just going, expected points per game, since that tries to roll it all into one by itself. And again, Brandon Ayuk's doing surprisingly well in that stat, which again is just, I'm going to put it in the back of my mind, wait to see a broader sample of games like we have with these other rookies and reassess. But I've noticed it. I want to notice it, and it's the same with his yards per team pass attempt, and it's the same with his dominator rating. It's the same with his he's having a good season in the few games that he's played so far. I hope it continues because that's another good prospect, right? But yeah, Claypool leads in expected points per game. Lamb leads in expected points per game, but Judy comes up third if we discount Ayuk. And he's not in the conversation. All of these players are performing, once you look at the games they've played, surprisingly above the threshold level, except for Jalen Rager, of course, because, fuck my life. LaVisca's definitely dropping out of it as well. Justin Jefferson falls down in expected points per game. I guess he's relying on... Yeah, it's this efficiency that's keeping him afloat. But efficiency is good, especially for a rookie. So that defaults me to yards per team attempt is actually what I mostly look at. That puts Higgins second, and interesting enough, Mims third. I still got a lot of hope for Mims. Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to Google that too, I guess. This thing? Huh. I don't know that's the same thing. It may be. I just reading it, the statistical language is a little above my actual statistical education, so I don't know. Trend appears in several groups of data but disappears or reverses when these groups are combined. Where's a for dummies section? There's got to be one, right? What this means. The practical significance of the Simpsons paradox surfaces in decision-making situations where it's possible, where it poses the following dilemma. Which data should we consult to choose an action? The aggregated or the petition? Okay, it does sound like the same thing. In the kidney stone example above, which I didn't read, it is clear that one diagnosis with small stones or large stones, the data of the representative subpopulation should be consulted, and team A would be preferred. I think this is what it's saying, is choose a better number, which would mean that you should we should put a formula in to do the one number or the other, depending on the number of games a player has played. Kind of help using two different calculations in the same column, though. Because that's, again, going to confuse people when they compare them to anyone else's data, which isn't a major concern, but... Yeah, here it is. On the other hand, if petition data is preferred a priori, I can't do Latin, which prevents one of the partitioning the data prevents one, okay, English, from partitioning the data into arbitrary subcategories, which is essentially what we'll be doing by saying using one number if they've played this game, then one number if they've played that game. Artificially constructed to yield wrong choices of treatments. Again, that's a fancy way of saying my problem with doing that. Batting averages on Wiki. Okay, dude, gotta appreciate I'm relatively slow here. Not very educated on the problem. Okay. Okay. Why am I looking at batting averages? Okay. All right. Common example of the Simpsons paradox involves batting averages of players in professional baseball. Well, it's not in any other sport, is it? It is possible for one player to have a higher batting average than another player each year for a number of years, but to have a lower batting average across all of those years. Yeah, that'd be the same as going year to average years is the same as going average weeks to, yeah, okay, yeah. This phenomenon can occur when there are large differences in the number of at-bats, or games in our case. Mathematician Ken Ross, hello dude, demonstrated that using batting averages of two baseball players, Jeter and Justice, during the years 1995 and 1996, in both those years, Justice have a higher batting average in bold type than Jeter did. However, when the baseball seasons are combined, Jeter shows a higher batting average than Justice. According to Ross, this phenomenon will be observed about once per year among possible pairs of players. But this is every player. Any player that's played, what are we through? 10 games now, so most have played at least 9 or 8. But if anyone's played 4 or 5, it happens every time. But again, they're using yearly numbers here, which is a little different. Yeah, I just brought it up just in case you want to show off Spaceman. Yeah, I get it. And it bugs the crap out of me. It was just a per game adjustment because I've been kind of stomping on per game arguments for a long time now. Sorry, I've got real work concerns. Students got issues that I'm trying to help them out. Anyway. Would give us an answer? I don't know. I doubt I'm going to come up with an answer to it. I'm just a problem noticer. This doesn't work. Someone solve it. All right. That's actually what I'm working on in yards per team pass attempt. I think this new one is what I'm going to default to because I can do it with seasonal data, and it creates similar numbers as looking at the average. So I think that's my answer. Instead of looking at just the weekly average, for example, this target share that we're talking about with Jalen Rager, a way to adjust for it is to go look at team numbers per game and then player numbers per game and then divide those two, and it creates a similar number or a more similar number, as if you literally selected all the weeks they'd actually played. And so I think that will be something of my answer to it, which again, I kind of hate that it's just per game adjustment essentially, but it seems like a fairer way when looking at the different results in all of this. Keep target share the way it is, just so people have the same number when they look at different sources, I guess. But since this is one I'm specifically playing with, I don't think there is a standard. Like there isn't a site that people respect as that's what yards per team attempt is. Everyone's got a slightly different one depending on the way they're calculating it. And I think I prefer this method, which is essentially, again, I had to import, and you can see it over here, actually. I had to import games played per team in order to create attempts per game. You sum the passing and the rushing, and then you do, that divided the number of games they've played. So you actually have their attempts per game, and then you look at a player's yards per game and divide their yards per game by team attempt per game. There's no great screen on StreamYard, by the way, that I can show you me and what I'm looking at. It all looks tiny. But yeah, if you look at I spam the database link at the top of the chat just for anyone who's here for stats and not to hear me drivel on about them. But in the team tab, I started importing games that a team has played. and then dividing their total attempts. So I can use this to import to the seasonal database. And then I do a player's yards per game. I know yards per game is terrible, but by that team attempts. And that's what's giving me this number here. And that way I don't have to have the weekly database to calculate it. And that means when I go back to my NFL database over here, I can actually calculate the same stat, yards per game divided by team attempts per game. And so we're actually, comparing apples to apples here, which is my main goal here. Because I want to look at, what rookies do, and some kind of reasonable threshold for what they should do if we're going to expect them to continue. And it does seem to be, the number seems to be around, you want them over 1 yards per team attempt per game or whatever. That seems to be what most rookies who finish in the top 24 do. The average of, let's say, all seasons. Where is it? All right, so all right, this one will do. So all players drafted in any draft round who have multiple top 24 finishes in their so their rookie stat, if they have multiple top 24 seasons, no matter where they're drafted, tends to be about 0.94. And so that's, I think, close to what my pretty fair baseline in that stat would be. But again, that's not helping me out a lot because pretty much all rookie wide receivers this year are past that. Apart from Jalen Reagor, apart from Laviska Shenault, who isn't someone I'm worried about. I'm worried about Reagor specifically. Mooney's below it. And I wrote him up in my target share article last week. Like, I love the opportunity he's getting, but he's going to need to be a little better with it if we're going to have a lot of hope for that 4th round pick. So let's see here. Yeah, so Mims, Judy, Lamb, Ayuk, Higgins, Jefferson, Claypool, I'm assuming. Oh, Claypool isn't above it. Okay. These are the rookie wide receivers this year who are actually above the average for players who went on to have multiple top 24 seasons after their rookie season. But again, it's only 10 games. They can finish. They can finish under it, and some players below it can finish over it. Claypool misses this list. Still feels a little bit of confirmation bias if I'm going to start saying he's not going to continue it because he's having a fucking great rookie season. You know what I mean? That would be, target percentage in those games, yeah. If you're looking at it in the games that he's played, you're looking at the weekly average. I think that would produce the same number, which is, I guess we can check if your target share for Jalen Reagor is 15.5 or around there, and then that's intellectually the same as literally what I said, just pulling up the weekly stats, selecting his target share and looking at the average, this thing. If it's below that, then presumably it's intellectually similar when looking at the season-long numbers. I try to track snaps, but RotoViz's app doesn't spit them out, interestingly enough. Yeah, I actually inserted opportunity share, the thing you're using for your article, just because I know you're calculating it. It's like, hey, I can do that. If you want to look at another example of it. And yes, it is minus quarterback attempts. Don't worry. I reread the start of your article just to make sure I was calculating it the same way. Team yards, I got that in here. I've also got it per game, especially now I'm importing team games. It's a little easier to do. Air yards going to each position. Oh, that's expected points. Where's the thing? I guess I don't have it by position for team, just overall air yards. Oh, here it is. Yeah. I put it in the target share by position. A little tab here. Okay. That seems wrong. I have to refix that. Air yards. So running the calculation straight like this is going to produce some weird numbers. Crossover! How you doing, buddy? When evaluating tight ends, good question. I've stopped writing my chapter on rookie numbers because I'm starting to think I want to do it a different way, and I would just want to reset. But I'll tell you what I've been looking at, because I'm trying to do all positions, the numbers that matter, essentially. I think this is it. No. Is it that? Is it just titled Book 1? No. Where's the thing I'm looking at for goddamn Jordan McNamara? Is it that? Okay, I've just got wide receivers in here, so this is a bit of a bitch. In fact, let me just default. I'm just going to default to what I normally say, what my current results say. All right, so which stats do I look at for tight end specifically? Rookies, college stats, right? First thing to know, it's really important when going between positions to know which year you're meant to look at or which year is best to look at. For example, you could look at their best year in a stat. You could look at their average stat or their average in a stat for their career. Or you can look at their first. You can look at their last. That's what my database is set up, so you can look at any of that. For tight ends specifically, I think best year is more important than the average, which is the opposite for wide receivers. I like to look at the average for wide receivers. I like to look at a tight end's best year. That's because a lot of tight ends don't play for multiple years. A lot of tight ends that turned out to be very good in the NFL didn't play for multiple years in college. Then lots of them start playing late in college and then go on to be great in the NFL. A number of examples of that as well. So average and also breakout age and age-adjusted metrics kind of struggle for tight end because of the pattern of college career that most tight ends, or a lot of tight ends that have gone on to be good, eventually have. Now, obviously, my tight end model is testing the best, but that's specifically because I'm creating models to improve their R-squared just so I can have them in there as a reasonable ranking pre- and post-draft. But if we're looking at raw stats, let's see. Let's take my models out of this. Draft and draft capital is obviously always going to test the best. Market share of receiving yards tends to do pretty well for tight ends, like their best year specifically. Oh wait, I'm going to take those out. Here we go. All right. Yeah, market share of receiving yards seems to be pretty good. I haven't tested it, apparently, for yards per team pass attempt for tight ends yet, but I'm pretty sure that one will work as well. The stats that I mostly look at for wide receivers in general, or players in general, is for running back specifically, I look at points per game more than most, I think. For wide receivers, I look at yards per team attempt or yards per team pass attempt, and also their breakout age for wide receivers specifically. And for tight ends, as far as I can guide you, and tight ends a little better than quarterback, but not as good as wide receiver or even running back, really. The best I can give you is look at the best year they have Look at the total volume and adjust it for teams. So that's why market share of receiving yards comes up as well. Apparently, I really haven't studied that for tight ends yet. I feel like I have a... Okay. Tell you what. This might stutter my stream, by the way, because it's big. But looking at tight ends... even last tests better than best, to be honest. Yards per team pass attempt. Yeah, receiving yards per team pass attempt is the one on my rookie database, and that's going to be your best one. And look at their last or the best season in that stat, and you're going to probably have the... Yeah, that's probably the best single number to look at outside of, draft capital. Let's see how that works out, shall we? So looking at 2020 class, outside of, Chase Claypool, it's Hunter Bryant and Harrison Bryant. And that's just using that single, the last year of their career, how well they did in that single number. Which worked out pretty well for them. Let's look at a class we know more about. Caleb Wilson was the best in that stat in his last year for the 2020 class, and this is kind of where I default to average. I'm looking at last right here. TJ Hawkinson comes in third in the class. Okay. Noah Fant came in like top 10. So yeah, it kind of sucks. Tight ends kind of suck in terms of predictiveness of metrics here. Mark Andrews came in first overall in his when you look at last year, yards per team pass attempt, followed by Hayden Hurst and then Mike Gesicki. That's pretty accurate, followed by Christopher Herndon. Followed by Tyler Conklin, apparently Will Disley and Ian Thomas. And that's actually probably that's a really good ranking of a class for any stat for tight end. That's probably why it's testing well, because it's got it accurately once or twice. Evan Ingram was the best in yards per team pass attempt in his last year in his own class, followed by Gerald Everett and then David Njoku, which I feel like is almost a better ranking than we ended up getting. Yeah, I would look at their average and best year in yards per team pass attempt. And I'd take whichever number's higher. You can kind of be real flexible with it with tight ends that way. Since where age and so on and so forth is not as useful because of the nature of tight end careers. Hunter Henry was the best player in his class in the last year of yards per team pass attempt, followed by Austin Hooper. That feels pretty accurate. Tyler Higbee came in 6th in his class. And between the three, you've got like 3 players who never did anything and never will. So again, that's the variance of tight end statistics. You're going to end up, not liking Higbee that much, but actually he was the one to like. And if you want to talk about conference adjustments there, because the 3 players between them played in like, what is it? No, Pac-12, Big Ten. All right. Yeah, I only recently put out a model for tight ends because their statistics are so awkward. There's no silver bullet at the position yet, if you know what I mean. Like, some of this is true for every position. Look at yards per team pass attempt, look at the best, the last, or the average. You pick the one you think is the best one. I like the average for wide receivers. I like the last or the best for tight ends, so on and so forth. But with wide receiver, we've got something of a silver bullet in breakout age, which provides a lot more context and better hit rates. through any threshold. And for running backs, points per game really seems to guide us pretty well as well. Quarterbacks, fuck knows. CPO maybe, who knows? But for quarterbacks and tight ends, there's no real silver bullet to help you adjust what the raw stats will rank them at. Oh, I haven't found one yet. So yeah, that's where I'm at the position. What does my tight end model currently use? Good question. That I just asked myself. I can't remember. Type model tight end. Because that's another way of answering the question. Like, which stats do I look at? I guess technically the one that's in my models. Although I really don't trust models in general. I'm using my pre-draft score adjusted by draft position and post-draft model, which has the highest R-squared, I guess. So what's my pre-draft model using? It's using combined yards and touchdowns. It's using dominator rating. It's using difference from average, which is the average of the position in their conference, actually. It's also using market share of receiving yards again. I'm probably going to have to create a new pre-draft tight end model to try and help boost these, because yards per team pass attempt should start to be used. Like I have with wide receiver. I feel like I said a lot there, and I don't know if the answer came through. So, Guy, if you're still there, if you manage to survive all this, the stat I would look at for rookie tight ends is yards per team pass attempt in their best or last year. That's going to be my simple answer. Yours is at 14.5. So we've got 3 different answers. Okay, awesome. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's something as simple as target share that everyone uses and is used to. Hey, Guy, did that answer it for you? Do you see where my head's at? As far as what my tight end model is using, it's heavily relying on market share receiving yards adjusted by the average. And that's where my pre-draft model results get spit out. And then I'm adjusting that by draft capital in the post-draft model. What should you do now? I'm going to scrap that and start using market share yards per team pass attempt, which is also in my database. And it's probably going to use their last or their best year, I would imagine, once I run through the process. But it's a little hard to know what a model's going to spit out. But if you just want to sort columns and then sort by draft class to look at one number, I would sort by last year yards per team pass attempt. There you go. And again, as you just saw when I was flicking through the classes, that has mixed results. But those mixed results are the best I can find just using one stat to rank an entire class by, outside of my post-draft model. And never trust a model, man. Use your eyes, Models are liars. Yeah, I think I started that once I found silver bullets for wide receivers. I was like, surely this works for the receiving position of tight end as well. It really doesn't. And part of that, I want to just say, well, those tight ends that turned out to be good in the NFL were just outliers, playing late, not playing complete college seasons. But here's the thing, there's very few good NFL tight ends for fantasy. So if you discount all the ones that did that, you basically have, we don't have any. So, it's not helpful. So definitely don't think of it as a wide receiver light or anything. Unfortunately, the same rules and tricks don't work for tight end. They just don't. The breakout ages at either threshold don't work as a significant modifier for ranks. They're not a silver bullet, is the way I said it before. And the ages they played just kind of throw them out the window. You know, the ages they enter the draft, kind of throw that out the window as well. Late breakouts, late declares. I don't think any of that works for tight end. And so we're left with the raw stats. So that leaves you looking at the ones that you believe or you like the most. And I can talk about R squared stats, you know, which ones score higher and don't in good samples. But ultimately, if you still are more comfortable with market share of receiving yards over yards per team pass attempt, that's good. That's good too. If you rank classes by that stat, you can have a pretty good idea. Just make sure you also flick through the seasons, the past seasons, and go, oh, look at how many people are between, you know, Tyler Higbee, who's been decent in the NFL as much as they stomp on whether he's going to be a top 12 or not, to Austin Hooper. It's like you can physically see the number of players it got wrong, and yet it's kind of you see the right players turning up in the top 10 kind of a thing, and then adjust by draft capital. That's honestly it. Now, the weird thing about tight end, there's a lot of weird things about tight end. It is the only stat in my database, at least going back to 2003, where draft pick, quarterback is like this true, but you've got to adjust within draft round. So anyway, draft pick tests a little higher than draft round. It is kind of weird. And I think what that means is you can adjust for the class itself a little bit more. So like this year, the NFL and we thought it was a weak tight end year, and you can kind of see that in where they were drafted. And so you can default to draft pick. Well, who was drafted a significant number of picks ahead of anyone else, kind of a thing. But yeah, draft pick. And it's not like it doesn't outstrip draft round. You can just stick to draft round if you're comfortable with it. Like first round, second round, third round, those things matter. But if they're both drafted within the second round, draft pick is a good tiebreaker if you yourself are torn on what the prospect is after looking through his stats or watching his tape or anything else. So, yeah, specifically for tight end. So again, everything seems to work a little bit different for tight end when you actually compare them to wide receiver. So I think that would be my main lesson. Just like, don't look at them the same way at all. Weirdly, again, when I think it should work similarly. They're both basically playing different type. It's just a different type of receiver, right? And they're a different type of wide receiver, so it should work, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. Which is why, you know, like when people start touting an Adam Troutman or whatever it is from lower conference, it's definitely worth paying to. Not that I don't love my undrafted free agent wide receivers, but yeah, kind of tight ends kind of come from all over the place. Their consistency of hits is troubling in terms of predicting the next one, to say the least. Sorry, student again. Sorry. I got an email I desperately need to respond to after I get off here. We're down to 2 people, so I assume that's Spaceman twice. How are we doing? So I'm looking at rookie tight ends. Hadn't even explored them yet for this season in yards per team pass attempt. I swear Albert O was doing pretty well there. Got injured last week, right? It did kind of suck that he was drafted in behind Fant. And yet he still showed up a little bit. That's kind of impressive. Why would they draft him? Sure, we just drafted Noah Fant, but yeah, Harrison Bryant. I miswrote that in my tweet, but Harrison Bryant's been the best tight end so far, I think. How we doing? No idea. How is James Robinson not the best running back in this class? I don't understand anyone who would have that take. Spaceman, you're tracking an opportunity share for your article, right? That's why I included it here. Is Antonio Gibson and Jonathan Taylor basically get the same opportunity share for you, or it seems off? Cam Akers, man, I had such high hopes. They've really been struggling this year. Oh, I'm at the top of the chat here. It's not a stiff drink. It's just a drink. All mixer, no stiff. Tell me about it, man. I diversified a little bit this time last year. I was mostly Derek Carr and Drew Brees. And Superflex, those are the quarterbacks I got over. Through week 10, this is week 10 data, so yeah, I have them like both at 25%. I thought Gibson had a lot more than that, you know. But through experience, I haven't been looking at running backs the way you have, so this is really my first time. And thing. Oh, wow, Claire was slipped out the top 12 for not playing last week. I did. Oh, looks like Ronald Jones squeaked into the top 12 because of last week's huge game. Or rather, this week's huge game because we're still in this week. Chubb's really going to hurt my Scott Fishbowl and Nick Chubb because I was relying pretty heavily on Kareem Hunt. Yeah, I had my fun. Todd Gurley's still in the top 12, and so is Ezekiel Elliott, by the way, guys. I mean, he's just dropped out of the top 5, but I mean, I know he's having a terrible season. We're tilting him in Dynasty, but the running back position has been so struggle bus this year. Still only have 2 players over 200 points. This time last year, it was like 5. Hey, buddy, how you doing? Okay, so yeah, my opportunity share in that database is a little off, apparently. Wonder how I'm calculating that wrong. I'm gonna go look then. Okay, so I'm removing quarterback attempts. Percentage of... Oh, that might be it. I think I'm missing some brackets here. So this is... what is it? Attempts divided by team attempts minus quarterback attempts. And then targets, same thing. No? Gibson's got 103 attempts, 30 targets. So that should equal, 133. It does. So 133 divided by team attempts and team targets, right? Rushing attempts and team targets minus quarterback. So I've got the team attempts at like 516. Yeah, so the calculation's working, right? So what am I getting wrong? Howdy, Edwin. I'm assuming your name is Edwin Goodman. Hey, buddy. Appreciate you coming in. Is that meant to be targets or targeted TDs at the end there? So team attempts minus quarterback. Only running back targets. Oh, okay. That would do it. So I got to take out. I've only got to. All right. Here's what we'll do. We don't need to minus quarterback targets. We just need to say only targets if they're running backs, right? Yeah, 46.3. Is that what you said his was? 46.3, yeah. Okay, got it. Fixed. Okay. Mr. Murray. That look more accurate to you? Oh, wait, no. Anyway, Swift jumped up as well. Taylor jumps up when I do that too. 43.8. Yeah, okay, yeah, I got the same number you do here now. All right, so I'm calculating it the right way. No problem, man. Appreciate you coming in. Thanks for clearing that opportunity share calculation up for me. James Robertson is now at 80%, by the way. Yeah, basically nearly doubles them, huh? When you just do only running back targets. All right, I guess I should get out of here and go deal with my student as well. Is anyone got anything they want me to talk about, look at, process, that kind of thing before I do? I'll post the link again before I get out of here. I'm going to update that opportunity score for you all later too. But basically, you just times it by 2. Still, to the point space, when Gibson and Taylor have had basically the same opportunity score, according to that stat. Pretty cool. Not expected, you know. All right, I'm posting the link in the chats again, guys. If you want all 2020 data, that's the link. Really appreciate you checking it out this week, and I'll talk to you again week 10, right? Or anytime on Twitter or anywhere else. Great to see you guys, girls, and fantasy fans. And I'll, talk to you again next week, like I keep saying. All right, I'm out.